My relationship to politics is I make podcasts and videos with Novara Media, which sort of originated from the kind of student movement, anarcho-left, in 2010. In 2010, you could find me with a hood and a little black scarf over my nose. But I've come a long way from there. I also worked last summer for the Corbyn campaign, but I don't think my role was decisive, so don't blame me for whatever happens in the next couple of years. My position in the Labour Party, I've been in the Labour Party for 2 years. My background was more in sort of like social movement-y stuff, but I'm a big convert to social democracy, actually. So in terms of, I'll get onto that in a second. No, I won't. I'll get onto it now because I forgot what I was going to say. So we're talking about the differences. What are the different sects within Labour's church? And I agree that Labour isn't too broad a church in the sense that we're all going to stay in the same party, and we should. I think obviously there's such severe differences within the Labour Party that it's often quite dysfunctional. I mean, it's difficult to look at the Labour Party at the moment and saying like, yeah, this is going well. You know, we're benefiting from the insight of the right and the insight of the left, and it's just, you know, we're drawing upon all these different resources and ideas, and it's looking great. No, it's a mess. It's a mess. But that's not going to change. Third parties are destroyed in the UK electoral system, partly because it's very difficult. The barriers to entry to not be seen as a wrecker is very, very high. So if there was a split from the right or a split from the left, so many people would dismiss that project as you're just leaving the way for the Tories, that one, it would be difficult for people to feel confident voting for you, and two, it would be quite difficult for you to bring the movement with you. So if for example, Corbyn was dislodged in some sort of, in a way where the membership didn't have control over that. So say he gets dislodged and then a lefty isn't let on the ballot. I'm sure there'll be some people on the left saying, let's go start a new party. But half the people on the left will say, no, let's stay. And then the few people who have left, you know, it's a losing game from the start. So one way or another, we're going to have to work out how to work together. That's the electoral system we've been given. I wanted to chat a bit about what I've found are the differences within the Labour Party. So you can define it in terms of ends. What's your goal? And I think that is relevant in some cases. So socialism obviously can mean a bunch of things. Do you mean from one extreme, the kind of New Labour one, which is you kind of leave political economy fundamentally as it is, but you think that if we're in power instead of the Tories, we can redistribute a little bit more of that wealth to people who are getting screwed over by neoliberalism. So that was, the New Labour position was, neoliberalism is inevitable, but it doesn't actually have to be managed in such a vicious way as the Tories were doing it pre-1997. At the other extreme, you've got people, and I know these people, for who sort of like participation in the Labour Party is a means to the end, which is a revolutionary socialism. Neither of those positions I have that much time for. I call myself somewhat idiosyncratically a class war social democrat. I think, so I think ultimately what we're aiming for is some kind of social democracy. Like I think we're going to have a mixed economy, we'll have some markets where they're useful, and we'll have the state intervene where it's useful, and we'll have some cooperatives where that makes sense. But I think that can only be maintained by mobilizing popular classes and by mobilizing the working class, and that can't be something which is safeguarded from above by some benevolent bureaucrats. And so especially I found that with my engagement with the Labour Party has been somewhat relevant. So say in Lambeth, which is my Labour Party, we actually have a particularly, I don't have much time for Lambeth Council actually. Lambeth Council was one where in the 80s it was a stronghold of the so-called loony left. One of the leaders of the council was brilliant, a woman called Linda Bellos. A guy called Ted Knight, I don't know that much how he was when he was leader of the council, but in my CLP meetings he is a little bit unwieldy. So I can understand why there might have been a little bit of opposition. But what that's meant is because there's this fear of the left in Lambeth, it's on complete lockdown. So the recent selection process for councillors, anyone who was remotely on the left would be excluded from the long list for having signed a petition, for example. And they accidentally let someone through to get onto the long list means that there's a panel of people who, with higher up positions in the party, and they'll accept you to say you could be a councillor if you want, and then you go to wards and they elect you to become the Labour candidate if you want. They let a Corbynite through by accident because she was an actor, so she has two names. She's called Sam Green and Sam Bolter. So she didn't do this on purpose, by the way. So she applies with this name, and they look her up and they're like, oh no, she seems all right. And they send her an email saying, yeah, you've been accepted. Then somewhere down the line, they realized she was a Corbyn supporter. So then they ignore her emails for 3 months. She's sort of saying, how do I get the addresses of secretaries? Because to get selected, you have to email the secretary of your ward, and they have to explain who you are so that people can say, yeah, we want this person as a candidate, because otherwise you're just a name, right? So he blanks her for 3 months. And then she goes to London Region, so a bit up the hierarchy. And then there's a bit more blanking going on. And then she gets forwarded an email from London Region, supposedly sent 3 days before she'd been emailed to say you've been accepted, to say you've been rejected. And like, it was obviously just forged on Gmail. So it was like, that was actually, we had a good CLP meeting where the left and the right are very divided in Lambeth. But actually the guy who runs the selection process came to the CLP, and everyone was like, actually, this doesn't look very, like even people from the right of the party were saying, I don't know if this is a stitch-up, but it looks like a stitch-up, and that's not very good. So there are real divisions. And I do think that does have to do with strategy as well, in terms of what methods are people willing to do in Lambeth or the country, and what people see as a threat. So I think, and that's partly related to how do you see the mobilization of the masses? Do you see that as a threat, or do you see that as an opportunity, or do you see that as necessary? So the New Labour strategy kind of was to, what's that word? You're trying to make yourself immune from the whims of the Labour membership or the trade unions or all the organised institutions of the working class, so that you can, as a small clique of people, make a politics which is as electable as possible, then go into government and implement it. Obviously, the critique is whatever they wanted to do, if you are willing to trust a bunch of supposedly well-meaning politicians to go into government and without any sort of working class power to hold them to account, just keep their word. And I mean, New Labour didn't really, right? I mean, it wasn't the kind of government that I think that I have much desire to work to be a part of that movement. Yeah, I think New Labour did some great things. I think in those 13 years, poverty did fall, but they didn't increase working class power in any way at all, and that meant that within 5 years of a Tory government, nearly all of that could be withdrawn. It also meant they did grotesque and horrific things like the Iraq War, which I think, whatever your record is, you can't really recover from that. So yeah, that's what I think is differences in terms of strategy. I think lots of people on the hard left have a ridiculous strategy, which is just sort of like, you don't need to make compromises, and if you mobilize enough of the working class and give them a coherent enough vision of socialism, they'll rise up. And it's like, maybe not. I love compromise, by the way, so I don't think the distinction needs to be between those who compromise and those who don't. And so they're at one end, and at the other end we have people who think basically the working class are either a bit useless or a bit dangerous. So we've got to come in from above and try and ameliorate some of the most grotesque elements of neoliberalism. I'm somewhere in the middle, probably towards the left. The soft left have tried this, right? So Ed Miliband, I wouldn't call him a class war social democrat, but maybe a community organizing social democrat. But even that minor reform, which was to sort of like, so the Labour Party, has anyone been Labour Party canvassing? Yeah. So it's nice, you know, you knock on the doors and stuff, but it's very, you just have a conversation. And they're quite, in Lambeth at least, I've been trying to persuade them to like do some community organising on some of the estates. And they're a bit like, ooh, we don't do that. I'm going to stop bitching about Lambeth, to be honest. I said that because I was going to tell you another story. I was like, no, I won't tell you another story. Because the Lambeth Council is, I'm going to tell you, they're scared of a mobilisation of ordinary people in Lambeth because they think if ordinary people are mobilised, then there's going to be some scrutiny about what they're doing to the council estates. So they prefer them to be passive. It's a safe seat. It's always going to be Labour. Anyway, where was I going? Ed Miliband. He wanted to do community organising. He brought over Arnie Graf, who's a very famous community organiser from the United States. Within the Labour Party bureaucracy, the field department who likes just data, knocking on doors and data, so you improve your data, so you knock on the right doors, so you improve your data, so you knock on the right doors. They didn't like it. They thought this was threatening. They leaked to the Sun that this guy didn't have proper immigration status and he had to resign. So that's sort of like the resistance to even the most moderate of reform and change shouldn't really be underestimated. What are the ways forward? Oh no, what's the prognosis I've got first? So I said the Labour Party at the moment is dysfunctional. That's partly because constitutionally at the moment it is a bit weird to have a PLP who are elected on a completely different time scale and by a completely different set of people to the leader. So the PLP are, it's very difficult to change the PLP at the moment, yet they don't have much role in electing the leader, and you can't be a functional leader without a supportive PLP. So I understand when people on the, the so-called right of the Labour Party say that we've got to go back to the electoral college system because you can't have a parliamentary party without the PLP, the Parliamentary Labour Party, the MPs, having some sort of support for that leader, because otherwise you just get a mess like you've got at the moment. But I think given how unchangeable the Parliamentary Labour Party is at the moment, I'd say complacent, jobs for life. If you ever suggest they shouldn't have a jobs for life, it's like, you're bullying me. It's like, well, maybe we just want a different MP next year, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that big a, if you're in a democracy, if you think it's an affront to you if someone suggests you might have a different MP, I feel like you've got a slightly odd notion of democracy. But yeah, in terms of the prognosis, I think it's dysfunctional at the moment. There's three options. Either the left wins, I can't see it. Either the right wins, it's probably more likely, or there's some kind of grand compromise. And how that compromise will be achieved, I think will probably have something to do with the Constitution. So at the moment, this year, there's the big project of the left is to institute what Progress have called the McDonnell Amendment, which is to lower the amount of nominations someone needs to be on the ballot in a leadership election to 5% of the PLP instead of 15% of the PLP. And the reason they want to do that is because when Corbyn goes, which, I mean, he will do one day, sooner rather than later, let's not get into the who knows, whatever. There's going to be a new leadership election, and the left want it guaranteed that they won't be completely blocked out of that, and that the majority of Labour Party members will have someone on the ballot they actually want to vote for, not someone they vote for just because it was, you had to. So the McDonnell Amendment is saying at conference, we want to reduce the threshold to 5%. Now, I've already said the 15% threshold and the members vote without much influence from the PLP is a bit dysfunctional. So why would you remove it to 5%? I'd say at this point you need to remove it to 5% because the alternative is a return to sort of like a fairly insular, oligarchic parliamentary Labour Party that think they all have jobs for life and don't really bother being responsive. They're more, in a safe seat, they're more fearful of their members than they are of the Tories or the opposition or whatever. So what I think we should do is make the parliamentary Labour Party much more fluid and much more responsive. So instead of the members going straight to the leadership, but you have this immovable parliamentary Labour Party, I'd say open primaries in every constituency. That's not just with Labour militants, because then you'll get progress versus militant, and it will be, you know, like, not progress versus, I did a Freudian slip there. Progress and momentum. Having some sort of factional war which doesn't have much relationship to the population of that area. I'd say have a primary where you're really trying to mobilise as many people in that constituency as possible. And once you've got a sort of responsive PLP, a PLP that changes according to public opinion, according to the energies of people who are on the progressive left, who are inspired, because you need activists, otherwise it's very difficult to build popular power. You are just going to have to say whatever the sun wants you to say, because they have all the bargaining power if you don't have any popular power behind you. So yeah, I'd say it's dysfunctional at the moment, but it's going to get more dysfunctional until there's some sort of grand compromise, and I think that's going to have to do with making the party more democratic in the sense of making the makeup of the PLP more responsive to changes in the general population. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to have to... Thank you. Yeah, well, thanks all for that.